Jesse, do we have everybody there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you barely. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay.
We have enough people here. Not
All right.
everyone.
It is noon. I'm still a bit under the weather, so I'm going to get us going. So hopefully we can get done at a decent time. First off, I see a new face in the room. I'd like to welcome Andre. Yeah, keep turning around. You see over there.
Camera here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Welcome, Andre. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Andre?
All right. My name is Andre Mbule. Been living in Wichita for 12 years now. Long story short, I met a girl in college and she dragged me here and I never left. And professionally, I'm in hospitality sales. We have a management company in town running 3 hotels here in Wichita. And I've always been really a fan of everything that's Wichita. And I guess that's how I ended up here. Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Andre. All right. Now you get to have your first vote with this committee. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at our previous meeting minutes. If so, and there's no comment on it, I'd be open for a motion to approve.
So moved. All right.
I'll second.
You good? Okay. All in favor?
Here we go.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now for the fun stuff we have out here. So Jesse's been trying to get submittable going for our operational grant application. I hear that's been a bit challenging.
We're doing all right.
Jesse, I'll let you kind of go over that process with us before it goes live in tomorrow, a day.
Yeah, tomorrow. Well, I mean, if you want to say it tonight at midnight, they will go live. Dominic, I'm not going to share my screen if that's okay with you. This is really just a final check. It's not much different. The guidelines are all on our main site. And this is basically everything that you guys approved at our last meeting. No changes. And then obviously when it's live, they will click submit to begin their application, which doesn't always make a lot of sense, but we work with what we have. Hannah, yours should be right there in the front. That one right there.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're all good. Let's see. And then the form, much like last year, it confirms that they've read the guidelines, select their organization size. I do have a supplemental document that will help guide them if they have trouble, just in an attempt to continue to make this more accessible. And then if they're a large organization, I do double check how many years in a row they've been in a large organization, or if they've been a large organization multiple years in a row. If they haven't, if this is their first year as a large organization, we do have a text pop up here. It just talks about the 1-year audit exemption that we all agreed to, that if this is their first year as a large group, they do not have to submit their audit. But if it's their second or third year, then obviously they do.
Can you just to put a pause on that one, because it came up specifically with Tallgrass in this last year. So could you explain where Tallgrass would fit in, if would be their second year or first year or even third year?
My belief is that this would be at least their second year. So Tallgrass would need to have an audit.
Of which we do preemptively know that they've already received.
Yeah.
So they would be in the running then for the next round. And for the organizations that teeter between the medium and large, I'm thinking of Wichita Children's Theater and Dance Center, that they've gone back and forth for, if it's their first consecutive year of 500 or more, they would have to have an audit. If they have not had 2 consecutive years of 500 or more, they would be considered a first time.
Yes.
Did I say that correctly?
Basically, so if the Children's Theater applies next year, we would, and they're above 500, we would love to see that they have an audit. But if they don't, and then they go, this is the gray area that we're just going to have to figure out as we go, if I'm being honest. And now that the cultural plan has been adopted and that future changes, even more future changes are possible, you know, I have plenty of ideas. I'm sure other committee members have plenty of ideas on how to address the audit issue for some of our borderline organizations. I would love to see organizations that require an audit maybe get some additional funding to help with that audit, because they are so difficult to obtain. But
thank you for that clarification. And obviously it's still a little bit gray, as every organization's operations are slightly different, but we think that we have more flexibility. We know we have more flexibility than we have in the past, and we'll address them on a case-by-case basis as we are able to, and bring them to the committee if there's anything that is decision-making-able.
We have the rest of their identifying information, employer identification number, primary contact, things like that. Organization staff list is pared down a little bit to just help speed them along. We no longer need to know how long that board was there, for instance, or we removed a column, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember which one. For the board, we no longer need to know who is their company that they work for. There we go. I'm sorry. This is apparently not as prepared as I thought. Mission statement, please describe what your organization does. Limit 500 characters. So no more novel for that one. Proposal narrative. This is the same text that you all reviewed at the last meeting, except for the objective moments. Just tried to help make this a little more understandable, a little clearer, especially based on Allison, when you said, like, I don't understand how this connects. So objective 1.1 from the 2024-2028 Cultural Arts Strategic Plan is increase by 10% per year in each zip code the number of underserved residents who access art and cultural opportunities. And then under that it says, this is the first of the new cultural plan's objectives that division staff believe connects to the cultural funding grant program. So it's just trying to help them understand that we are tying these next 5 questions to this objective 1.1. Same thing for 3.3 and same thing for 4.1. So it's 15 narrative questions, which is basically what they were asked to answer previously, just organized in a slightly different fashion. Additional information, we did clean this up a little bit for ease. Fundraising data, much cleaner than it was before, much simpler. Here's their section to upload their complete Form 990, which we discussed. So they will no longer have to upload additional financial documents if they upload the complete 990. And if you say I'll be submitting additional, then you can obviously, your boxes for uploading go up there. Current budget, asking when their fiscal year starts so that we can get a better idea of how these numbers play into what's happening right now. In-kind donation, this is a selfish thing for Jesse, just to make scheduling the Q&A easier. Please tell me when you'd like to do so. And then some certifications. So our top one is new, that they understand that these are operational only funds. Second one is also new. It's because we're using this program as a match for the NEA grant. So they just have to admit, or they have to confirm that they're not disbarred from working with the federal government, which I would be incredibly surprised to learn that any of our organizations were, but we have to ask. And then they would submit. Should hopefully not be any longer of an application as compared to last year. And in fact, in some cases, hopefully will be shorter or easier to gather information. Dominic, I know you weren't able to see any of that. Do you have any questions? Or Nadine? Does anybody have any feedback or additional clarification they'd like? That was fine.
Is
Great.
everyone aware of the timeline that we're sitting at to do this and our next step? I know we have a few members in there. I can explain that, or Jesse, you want to go through what we're sitting as far as how this application process goes, like in 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, the cultural funding program, the applicants have usually had about 3 months to apply. Because we're opening this later than usual, they have 2 months this year to apply. In reality, most of them, it's just the last week, if that they use. So this really won't be a big burden on most of our applicants. The time to review for the Cultural Funding Committee is still 6 weeks. So you'll still have a full 6 weeks to review all of our applicants. Applications close on August 5th. Should be Monday, August 5th at 11:59 p.m. So they have the weekend plus a day to finish it. 6 weeks-ish later, the committee will meet for the Q&A sessions, which will be on September 19th. That's Thursday. And that is, again, sort of an all-day marathon session of just meeting with these organizations for 10 to 15 minutes and asking clarifying questions. We will supply you with breakfast and lunch. The week after that, we will, well, after September 19th, excuse me, you will finalize your scores, and I will take that information and put it into a database, trying to just give you as much information as possible, average scores, things like that. On September 26th, also a Thursday, we will meet to deliberate our recommendations, your recommendations. So on the 26th, you will have all the data that I have as clearly as presented as I can make it. And from that, you will determine what organization receives what award. It's past couple of years been a pretty straightforward process. Hopefully that continues, but you know, that's up to everybody here. If you feel strongly about something, you feel strongly about something. The week after that, we will meet to finalize our recommendations for council. That'll be our usual Thursday meeting in October. And about 2 weeks after that meeting, Lindsay and I will take those recommendations to City Council for approval. And that will be essentially the end of everyone's responsibility as regards the operational grants. It sounds like a lot when I say it all at once. It's spread out over a long period of time. You will be absolutely fine.
It is a, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we no longer hand you bankers boxes worth of paper.
It is a much easier process. And Jesse will stay on top of us to make sure that we get in there to start doing our reading our applications as soon as he has them in there. The Thursday, the first one I mentioned on the 19th, that is an all day. The 26th, we haven't gone all day recently, but I would still advise you to plan on that being an all day. We've usually been done by 1 o'clock or so the last couple of years. We've started what, 9 the last 2 years, right? Yeah. But just to play it safe, just on that 26th, just block out the whole day. It's just safer that way for us. Enjoy your extra time. Only reason I asked to go over that is our next area is probably the most exciting thing we've had from the cultural funding outside of getting a new plan since I've been on this committee. Traditionally, our grants have been operational for developing arts or artist access, which is more artist training and artist development. We actually get to fund programming and do things that everything we do makes a difference in our community. Operational grants are really, really hard to get, but actually getting to actually fund a program is really exciting to me. We spoke about it briefly, what, the last 2 meetings or just the last one, right?
I think mostly just the last one.
Yeah. But I will then hand that over to Jesse and Lindsay to kind of go through where we ended up after the last discussion.
Yeah, I will take one quick step back. Lindsay reminded me of something I didn't talk about. As part of the operational grant process, next Thursday and Friday, we will have what are known as informational sessions for anyone to attend. We will have an in-person informational session and a virtual informational session. Those of you who are here in person can see Thursday, June 13th. 10 a.m. will be virtual. I have a Teams link. 2 p.m. will be here at City Arts. Friday, this is about submittable. So helping anybody with submittable, and if they have other questions, I'll answer them, of course. But again, virtual and 2 p.m. here in City Arts. If any members of the Cultural Funding Committee are able to join any of those meetings, it's always nice to have additional faces. It's not required, but especially our more senior members, you know, if they're able to be there just to answer any questions that may come up, that's always helpful.
And the reason we love having committee members there is committee members cannot communicate with applicants during the application process because we don't want it to be perceived as lobbying. We really want to, if committee members do get questions from applicants, send them our way so that we can help them, guide them through the process. But what's helpful in these info sessions is I will tee you up with questions saying like, what are you looking for? Are there anything that you've seen in past applications that have been successful or unsuccessful? Because it just helps applicants know who you are, that you're real people, that you're residents in the community, versus when they hit submit, they have no idea who's viewing it on the back end. So it is nice from that end. I will say we don't typically get a lot of people attending these events, but specifically the virtual ones, we record them. I think last year, no one attended the virtual one.
It might be because I forgot to send the link out.
Okay, well, no one attended for various reasons, but we record them and then we put them on the website because realistically, we're doing this the week they open. By the time they actually go to apply, they need the refresher so that it's easy for them to pull up anytime. So that goes on our city's YouTube channel and on our Cultural Funding Committee landing page. So it's an easy resource to double back and be like, what did they mean when they said that again? Because if they're anything like me and they're grant writing at like midnight and they know they can't call us directly, even though sometimes they do, it's just a really helpful tool. So that's one of the reasons we try to do it right at the front end of the application series. If we find that we're getting a ton of questions about the same thing, we might decide to have additional info sessions closer to the due date, but that's that. If you are interested and able to attend next week, let us know. We like to know who's going to be there just to make sure that we don't have more than 6 members so we don't end up in a meeting quorum, which is not what we want to do. So 5 people or less preferably. Yeah, that's the info session.
Yeah.
So sorry, we can go back, unless there's any questions about that, we can go back to the really exciting work.
I have one really quick question.
Yeah.
On the audits that they're submitting, the ones that do have to provide audits, is that information that you guys go through, or do we look at that as part of the application process, that detail?
It is up to the reviewer exactly how far into an audit you want to dive. We have members of this board who are more financially literate than some of the rest of us, and we often trust that they are the ones that are truly double checking that information.
So we will review it for compliance just to make sure it's accurate to the time period that's relevant for the grant, but we're not looking into it for any sort of qualitative data. We rely on the committee to do that.
Okay.
And in particular, I'll shout them out because they're not in the room. Martha and Jim on the committee, this is their area of expertise, and I'm sure would be willing to help other committee members navigate those. And Hannah, I'm sorry, and probably others there. And maybe more of you because you all do your taxes. So there's that. But yes, the committee does review the audits, not staff.
My wife does our taxes.
The applicants that do show up for this question and answer session, are they typically in the smaller groups?
Oh, the virtual sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's the newer applicants.
Yeah.
Will show up. I believe last year for the in-person one, we had members from Forum Theater come. And then one or two others who didn't end up applying. So
I think some folks that are just like dipping their toe in the grant writing arena are just trying to figure out if they're even eligible, if they have the capacity to do the grant. But I know Make ICT attended our first year. They didn't apply the first year. They did apply last year. So it's very small conversations, but we have seen them yield applications that have been successful and granted in the past.
So what about the applicants that we saw this last round that we had a lot of feedback for? Is this an info session for like geared towards them too, or is it where they can ask questions specific to their application and like that would be useful to them, or is it just for the newer applicants?
Well, Jesse, I'll let you take that because you're going to be the one leading us. So
my quick answer to that would be absolutely, and I can encourage anyone who has questions, previous applicants who have questions, to come and seek clarification if necessary. I think this, as we like to say around here, the spirit of the meeting is for those who have questions about the process and eligibility and things like that, but I wouldn't turn somebody away who wants to connect about something that happened in the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered because I know we offered some feedback last year to different applicants, but if they had questions going into this year's
Absolutely.
round,
Yeah,
maybe you could reach out to them about.
I can absolutely encourage them if they want to speak in person about any of it, they're welcome to come.
I will also offer that because we have some changes in the application process this year and aligning it to the strategic plan, we really want to make sure that that message gets across, that it's slightly different, the intent is still the same, but we think that it's better aligned. So versus having the same question on the grant for the last 15 years, the questions are slightly different, but there's reasons behind it. So we really want that message to get across. If there are more individual questions on specific organizations, we would likely defer them into like a one-on-one, hey, let's meet and discuss your specific org and see how you fit in the program based on feedback we've received in the past. Great questions. Did you have a question?
Actually, no, I think it was already asked.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, Dominic, it's time for the fun stuff. This looks very finished. Don't believe it. Tear it apart if you need, okay, as we go through it. I just have to do things a certain way, and so that's the way that I do them. City of Wichita Programmatic Grant Program. The 2025 programmatic grants, as announced by the City of Wichita. I don't know. How would you like me to go through this? Should I read the whole document?
That's a good question. So per our last meeting, when we had this announced, we took all the feedback and kind of the direction we thought the committee wanted us to go, and we put pen to paper and developed what we think that program could look like. Jesse has spent a lot of time going through the NEA requirements to make sure whatever we would propose is in alignment with that. So we tried to match what the committee was giving us some direction with, what we think what we know the strategic plan is looking for, what the NEA is looking for, and this is our best effort into putting pen to paper. It's completely draft form. If you decide you want to throw it out the window and we give $175,000 grant, we can definitely do that. This is just a draft of what we think we can do with that fund. For those new to the conversation, we received an NEA grant for sub-granting for projects specifically in the amount of $75,000. It can be distributed any which way, but it's project grants. It's not operational or professional development, which are the two grants that we currently offer.
I guess I'm going to start with this second paragraph under 2025 programmatic grants. So any individual or organization with a project that aligns with the division's mission is welcome to apply for one of the three grants. Projects may be of any scope, with the grant funds representing any percentage of the project's budget. Thus, selected projects will not be required to add or match funds. Does that make sense to everyone? And does anyone have a question about that? So basically we're saying, if you have an idea, come to us. we don't need it to be $1 million idea that we throw $25,000 into. If it's a $25,000 idea, perfect. And in fact, in the next paragraph, we're going to say that we would prefer it to be a smaller project where these funds represent a large part of the budget. Oh, go ahead.
Is it, I mean, I think it's probably a given, but they can't apply for a $25,000 grant for a $10,000 project. So I don't know if it needs to say, right? I mean, we're not.
I
It
think,
needs to be, the project cost needs to be at least 25,000, or are we thinking we would entertain a $10,000 project and do something else with the remaining 15?
So in the top paragraph under the grants, we do say that this is the amount that we're looking to give out. We suggest, or we recommend, that the funding amount does not, they don't necessarily have to meet the $25,000 grant, but we really recommend it. So if they have a $22,000 project, I think we should definitely entertain it. We want it to be as open as possible,
Yeah.
but also
What do we
have
do
some.
there? 'Cause they're saying free $25,000 grant, so do they still get the 25,000 or do we cut it back?
We would only be able to award what their max budgeted requested. So if they're only requesting 10,000, that's all we would be eligible to fund. Similar to, I think, the Artist Access Program, we could open up an additional round of small projects if we had remaining funding left over.
I was reacting to that second
Sure.
statement in the second paragraph, project may be of any scope of the grant, funds representing any percentage of the project's budget, but they can't represent 150% of the project budget.
right.
So I don't know if we want to say
Yeah.
that up to $25,000 per.
Yep.
Or some projects per project or something.
I will look further into that.
Jessica, is that next paragraph, is that part of the NEA requirements or their recommendations? The special consideration will be given to.
No, that's Jesse Koza being Jesse Koza.
Well,
Well, that's aligning
ahead.
with our mission of reaching and serving historically underserved or marginalized communities.
No, I was asking about that because we do say below there, special consideration will be given towards projects where grant funds represents at least 50% of it. So we are asking them to go higher. So, you know, if you're giving us a $50,000 project and we're going to fund half of it, that should get consideration, right? Is that what your language you had in there?
So the language is meant to say that we are going to prioritize projects that are $50,000 and below.
Okay.
So you know, that $25,000 to $50,000 is really a sweet spot, I think, for this grant program.
Yeah. And if we could put that in language slightly better, I think it would solve everyone's concerns. Because I like that last paragraph. I think it really sums up what we have in there, and it gives us flexibility as well. God forbid we have another pandemic where we have to adjust what our special considerations go into. But as long as I've been on this committee, those have been areas that have struggled because we want to find ways to fund, but it has not been we've had struggles at times.
Sure. Moving on, eligibility, this is basically the same thing. Directly employed by or legally affiliated with the city. I am not certain that this would affect most of our cultural institutions. I would need to double check fully, but I believe it would only disallow Cowtown and City Arts from applying for these grant funds.
What about the Indian Museum?
So the Indian Museum has a board that I think could apply.
Okay.
And it would I just think that like the director, who's a direct employee of the city, couldn't apply as an individual.
Okay. The difference is Cowtown and City Arts, our operations are 100% funded by the city. Okay. Although we have support organizations, Indian Museum, that is not the case. It is an independently managed organization, though the management are city employees. Yes, right. It's every organization operates a little bit differently.
What about the Great Plains Nature Center? Because they have a city component
Yeah.
there.
That's where we want to look into that a little bit deeper to figure out who would be eligible and who isn't, as city affiliates themselves. But I think in the spirit of the conversation that was had last month, and obviously there's new members to the conversation this month, was to open it as wide as possible. So you didn't need to be a nonprofit. You could be an individual artist or a small group, for-profit business organizations like Roxy's or the Crown Uptown. They could apply into this opportunity as well. We just really want to open the network to anyone that has a good idea. We would love to be in a position to entertain it ultimately, as long as they're not already funded through the city to a certain extent. So we're working on that one a little bit.
And legal affiliation does have a real definition. And so, you know, as far as Great Plains Nature Center goes, I don't know if city funding is enough of a percentage of its budget to call it a legal affiliation. If that makes sense. Okay, the grants. Like we said, 3 grants of $25,000. Do not need to use the entire amount, though we recommend it. In fact, we would probably be in their ear going, don't you want to do this one more time? Don't you need it to be a little bit bigger? You know, couldn't it get up to 25? Subrecipients will receive their funding as a lump sum payment after the contract has been finalized. That should say can receive. Basically, this all gets into legal stuff, but we're going to just give them the money and then reconcile it at the end.
So it's not a reimbursement grant. That's what I'm going to say.
It is, we're just giving them an advance payment.
Okay, because
Sure.
that was a little bit of the language.
Sure.
At first when I read it, it felt like it sounded like you would get the payment after the project is ready.
So the idea is we can give them advance, like if they know they're going to have to buy something to make the project happen, they can tell us, and then we can give them advance payment so that they have the money to buy that thing. It just gets really complicated. Like they need to tell us like 2 months out because we have to go to the NEA to get the money, and then the NEA gives us the money, and then we give them the money. You know, it's a lot. And so, go ahead.
I guess I read this as soon as they sign the agreement with us, then we cut them the $25,000 check. They do have to provide us the receipts and the invoices on the back end.
That is the way that we decided to do it.
Okay.
Yes, because it's the easiest way for the artist to just have the funds right away. It is just being considered if we want to get into the jargon of it. So.
Is there any risk though, if, I don't know, we give the money to an individual up front and then they get sick or they win the lottery and they run off to the Bahamas or something?
Yep.
Yeah.
There is risk.
That would be within our contract though, that,
Okay.
Yep.
and say they budgeted 25, they only spent 20, they would have to return that additional 5, and it would be contractually obligational. So the worst case scenario, it could go to like a form of collections if it doesn't get returned.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing about this funding, it does have to have indirect costs. So unless they have a rate, an indirect, y'all are learning about all the stuff that I got to learn about these past few weeks. Unless they have a negotiated rate with the government for indirect costs, we're saying up to 10% can be indirect, which is basically saying operational costs can be up to 10% of the project. So up to $2,500, you can pay yourself, you can pay your rent, you can pay for, you know, whatever you need to do to make sure the project can happen, if that makes sense.
Can we say up to 10% or 25% of the max grant award?
Yeah.
Just so it's clear, it's not 10% of their project budget, higher or lower. It's like, it's the maximum grants that we're gonna offer, 25,000.
Yes.
Or if we change the number.
Yes. Can do. Yes. Okay. The application. a lot of my research before starting this was in equity and making an equitable process, an equitable application. What is an equitable RF? Because this is an RFP. What does that look like? And so a lot of this is based on that research on universal guidelines for learning that I've learned a lot about now. So if you are like, why did he choose to do that? I probably have a reason, and I'd be happy to explain it and happy to change it. So name, address, contact info, all straightforward. Again, number 5, please check here to certify that you are not excluded from doing business with the federal government. It's literally a section in the guidelines that say, do not contract with the enemy, which I found very humorous. Anyway, how does it connect to the city's new cultural arts strategic plan, which we may need to change based on your edits, Lindsay, that earlier when you said it needed to connect to the mission.
Mhm.
So we'll need to.
It says also the strategic plan and the division's mission.
Okay, sorry. All right. So that's hopefully just a drop down that they can select an option or they can specify later on. Moving on, you have a choice in how you respond to the rest of the questions in the application. This is all very draft language. You can write out your answers, or you can submit a recording where you simply speak your answers. That recording can be either audio or video. The City of Wichita recognizes that no applicant is the same, and so as city staff try to create a more equitable and accessible process, you may choose the option that best lends itself to your strengths. How would you like to answer the rest of our questions? I'd like to write, I'd like to submit a video or audio.
Really? Like audio responses to all questions? Like that sounds like it would be, you then transcribe them or something?
We can discuss that, yeah.
Oh my goodness, it just sounds like it could be really taxing.
Like, what's the maximum amount of time it takes to read an application, and that's the maximum amount of time they have to record it?
The page after the one that you're on is I want to submit a video or audio recording.
Oh, so it's
Just very briefly, there is no maximum or minimum length requirement for your audio video recording, though we would recommend trying to keep between 5 and 15 minutes if possible.
Okay, so they're approaching to get it.
That recommendation, I don't know, some people get started talking and it becomes quiet.
I understand.
Speech.
Are we putting character limits on the written?
I had not planned to. I'm happy to change that. I'm just telling you,
So this is the NEA.
this is not the NEA.
Oh, this is us.
This is me. Don't even have to say us. This is me. Well, let's just very briefly, because the questions are the same. Let's just go through the I want to write my answers section. Please use the space if you feel you need to explain your answer for question 6. That's if they choose not to select one of the pre-select how do you connect to the cultural plan. Describe your vision for the finished project. This can be a piece of studio public art, a performance, a published work, or something else. You'll be able to upload images or other documents at the end of the application. See the list of full potential project categories here. That'll be a link. Sample questions to consider. Does your project have a physical location? If so, where? And so on. Question 10. Describe how you would go from receiving the grant to completing your finished work. This is your timeline. Sample questions to consider, answer. What experience do you have? Would you partner with an individual or organization? Would you connect with the local community? How long would it take you? What are the steps along the way? Describe how you plan to use the funds for the project. I even point out this is an incredibly important section of the application, and we recommend you provide as much detail as possible. That's from the Universal Guide of Learning. You want to point out the most important sections. Please select from these options. I want to write, I want to upload, I want to describe my budget using text. No matter the selection, this is internal. No matter the selection, a text box will appear to allow them to explain some or all of their budget.
I like that.
Why do you feel your project should be selected? This is an unscored question. This question is unscored and not required, so you will not lose points for leaving it blank. There is a chance that it might be important if a tiebreaker is needed, so we recommend answering it as sincerely as possible. That's an opportunity for them to just talk. And again, not everybody is trained on how to do this. Not everybody has filled out an application like this before, but they may say something really profound in this box that really resonates with us and rockets them upward on our list of potential subgrantees. Please provide any samples of your work or other images or documents you feel help explain your final vision or the steps to get there. If you need to provide links to any websites or other online documentation, please do so here.
Can we pause and go back to question 10 real quick? Can we add the word timeline in there somewhere?
Yeah.
I know that last bullet implies it, but
Yep.
I would encourage just us naming it.
I'm going to jump in real quick here to defend Jesse on his choice of timeline and video. As somebody who gets the privilege of judging numerous Emmy nominations from across the country, and many of those are half-hour programs, you'll be surprised how quickly it goes and how much more efficient a 15-minute video application is compared to having to read the depth of information we're going to get on the written side of things. Even watching a 30-minute video, unfortunately, you'll have an idea where you sit pretty quickly in that based on the early information on the questions he has on there. So I'm not concerned. I understand what everyone's saying about, oh, this could be overwhelming. It is not. It actually is a lot easier than going through reams of paper if you were to print them out, or just going through the computer and scrolling from section to section to section and making notes. You're also able to very easily see what the applicant's trying to get at, or even some of their examples of their work. I mean, if they're choosing to do a musical, something in an audible genre, we can get examples of their work very easily at that point and kind of move us in that direction. So I'm not concerned. I'm actually more concerned with the 5 to 15 minute window. With 5 minutes is not enough to get through all that information effectively to tell their narrative. But I'm often surprised on how well people can keep their pacing at times if they work at it.
So and I agree with you on the 5 minute part, Dominic. I'd be very surprised if somebody could answer these questions well in 5 minutes. I was mostly concerned that folks would submit a 2-minute video, and I'd say, you need to give me so much more information. And so to give them a minimum of, this has got to be, I recommend you do at least 5 minutes. Hopefully we can tease out more information without having to go back and ask them for it.
Is that something that would make more sense to come from you guys, because you continually offer support to the applicants throughout the process. So even though this is what the application is going to say, if they hopefully have questions, or I don't know how to talk for more than 2 minutes, then that's where the support and assistance comes from. It would make more sense to come from you guys versus saying, well, talk for at least 5 minutes, but don't talk for more than this, but don't ramble, but say it well.
Right.
I think it's very comparative to how Jesse provides support to the written application to showcase potential weaknesses in an application, or where we might encourage them to elaborate. Ultimately, it's up to the applicant to meet those expectations. We're just providing guidance and advice. So if things are submitted earlier, we can say, hey, I don't think you fully answered these questions. You might want to put regardless of time, a little bit more content in there to better answer the questions that are likely going to come up from your application. So long story short, yes, we will provide more info.
One thing I skipped over, let me finish the application, and then I want to go back and talk about the timeline, because I skipped right over it accidentally.
In terms of the questions in the application, do we need them to describe what their requirements are for the installation of their project? I don't, are they where's the art going? As far as like who else do they need participation from, maybe?
Yeah, we can certainly add more sample questions that we'd like them to answer, unless you think that that's like absolutely something they must answer, then we can look at adding it as a.
I guess I'm just still trying to figure out how, like, we've got these 3 projects, we talked about maybe having some targeted for certain areas, but are we providing them with the place where the art is going to be installed? Are we telling them this is where the art's gonna go, and they are then providing an application to put a sculpture in this location, or to, I don't know, paint a mural on this, but like, are we giving them the, okay.
So we kind of zoomed out a little bit from that discussion last time. Last time there was a discussion about having these be a little bit more targeted in terms of one is studio art, one is performances, one is do whatever you want. That has been pulled back a little bit to all 3 of them being do whatever you want.
And then they would need to have the solution, full solution. So if they're gonna create a sculpture, they need to know where the placement of that sculpture is gonna go. And if it requires participation from the city of Wichita to put the sculpture somewhere on city of Wichita grounds, they would need to sort that out themselves.
Yes and no. Yes, we would love for them to have an idea of where it should go or where they think it should go, or if they're working with the community would have it. I have already spoken with Jana Irwin, our public art manager. I said, Jana, if somebody wants to come in and do public art, $25,000, would you help them through that process? And she said yes. Mm-hmm. So if we select somebody that's going to do a sculpture somewhere, Jana will work with them in making sure that everything is done correctly. We're not just going to leave it totally to them to get it done.
If the city's involved in their project, by all means, we will help participate. Similarly, if it's a performance of some sort that the desire is to take place in a city facility, we can help navigate that for them as well. But ultimately, the applicant has to pitch the committee the project.
Okay.
And we didn't, the more we tried to like pinpoint, like, okay, is it a public art component? But if someone wants to do a pop-up dance or how do we make it as vague as possible with as tight of guardrails as possible, so we don't get things that we would never be able to fund.
Okay.
And we do hope to have like a list, and there's a little bit in here, I forget where it was, of like the types of projects that could be funded. Could it be a festival? Could it be a performance? Could it be an album? It could be anything under the sun. It could absolutely be public art. That doesn't have to be on a city property. It could be on private property that's public facing. The gamut is really, really wide open. Okay. We do have some limitations in terms of property per the NEA on any modifications to historic properties. And it can't be used for like a capital project. So it couldn't be used for the aviation museum to paint the front of their building hot pink. Like we wouldn't be able to do that. So there are some limitations that we're still working through that will have to be in there. But could it be a sculpture put up in the city plaza? Yes, it could be. I don't know if that made it more confusing.
No, I
okay.
think it makes sense. I just was, I'm thinking about.
Applying? Are you thinking about applying?
No, definitely no.
So again, I want to submit a video or audio recording. The questions are exactly the same, and I do recommend that they write them down separately, take a screenshot, something so that they can refer to them as they're recording. And then a similar budget question, but they do have the option that if they feel that they have described it enough in the recording, and again, if they don't describe the budget well enough, then they just don't get scored very well, right? Like some of this is on them.
That's the only part that makes me nervous is I want to see numbers on a spreadsheet.
I get it. Yeah.
But maybe that's just me.
And this is where maybe Jessica and I divert a hair of the risk that's implied. So we need to make sure that we have to have contractuals that indicate financial stewardship or safety and financial stewardship. These are federal funds, but it's still public money, same as what we distribute. So we need to have a proof of concept that indicates that these are fundable organizations or a fundable project. It's up to the applicant to prove that to us. And if they do not provide any sort of like concrete numbers, the committee, you will have a really hard time of scoring them appropriately. But that would be up to the applicants too. We could provide a suggested template,
And we will.
if that's the desire.
I'm thinking like, how would you describe a budget in a video? Like, are people gonna be comfortable saying, these are our planned costs, here are the dollar amounts, here's the total, you know, anything that's, I don't know, I just haven't seen that done a lot. And maybe people are, I don't know, I just can't imagine someone who's not comfortable making a budget on a spreadsheet being comfortable or being able to describe those very specific numbers that we want to see in a budget verbally.
Agreed. My thought is that they may have a fabulous idea, and we may simply need to work with them more on figuring out that aspect of it. They may just have a general lack of comfort with numbers, but they know how much things cost, or they know how to get something done. I think that this could be an experiment that does not work. Not having them put numbers on a spreadsheet may not work. But I think that if somebody sees that they are required to input their budget, it may cause them to not apply.
Oh,
Say again, Terry?
you really think that would keep somebody from not applying?
I do think that it would. I think that forcing somebody to input a budget would keep them from applying. I do think that.
I agree on that. I feel like a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot, some people might not apply if they have to, you know, come up with a budget. Because I feel like there's a big majority of people that don't even have a budget in general and don't deal with numbers at all. It's foreign to them. So yeah.
Okay, I can understand that. So then what support do we, like, is the committee offering support? Are you two offering support after the contract is signed that you'll help them put together a budget? Is that within your bandwidth and your job description as we take on these new projects?
I mean, because we're awarding the money based on the budget, right? Project, so they have to have some idea of cost.
So they're just jumping forward a little bit. There is a suggested rubric. Over which, it's okay.
Good.
These are questions over which there are 50 points that they can potentially earn, with up to 10 bonus points if they meet our preferential situation. If somebody got the 50 points and then on the budget question they got a 3, they're a 53 out of 60, we might say, okay, their budget, we have a lot of questions about their budget, but this is something that we really want to see happen. And so Jesse and Lindsay, we're trusting you guys to help guide them through this process to make this thing happen. They may not score as well on the other questions either. And so they have a weaker application and somebody else is above them and they don't get it. It could be an opportunity to say, okay, look, you had a really great application, but this budget issue blew up in your face. Like, you've got to learn how to do this. And so in 2 years, when we do this again, you need to have a budget. And so it could be a learning experience for them as well. So I think that allowing them to talk about their budget rather than forcing them to input these numbers on a spreadsheet will open it up to another two people. And unless it's the perfect application, it probably won't work, but it might. And I'd rather leave that possibility open, is where I'm at with this. If it's the committee's will, and I'm fine, that we have numbers on a spreadsheet, we can have numbers on a spreadsheet.
Jesse, I like where your head is 100%. And what was most intriguing when you guys brought that to this committee was this is our opportunity to bring outside voices that we don't normally get to see with an operational standpoint. One of the great things about the current cultural plan we get to play with is we can now, with this program, make a direct impact in our community. I love the operational grants because there's so few of them, but these are ones where when we sit through those operational discussions, we're seeing gaps out there that are not being addressed. We know, hopefully, when all you go through this first session of the operational grant process, you will start seeing those areas too. With this coming shortly afterwards, we can say, hey, like Jesse said, there may be some things that are giving us anxiety as far as their budgeting, but this is something our community needs. This is something that we are desperately lacking, that we weren't able to fund beforehand, but now we can. So I like where your head is at. I hear everyone's discussion, and I think there are some tweaks that need to be made to this, but I don't think it is a matter, just one vote, one thought needs to be thrown out and start over again. I really, really do appreciate the thought you put into this about bringing in more of those voices that we do not have, either in the artist access or even in the general grant operational funding process we go through. So one voice, one thought, but thank you, Jesse. I do like where you are headed with this at this point.
And I'm more than happy to be completely wrong about this. That, like, let me just say that if we try this and it was the dumbest idea to not have people write down numbers, I'll accept it.
I will
Well, I
say,
guess you can always go back. I mean, if that's, if for some reason it's not working, you can always go back and say, we need you to clarify, we need you to fill this form out.
Yeah.
for like even just NEA compliance in our city, in order to cut the checks and everything, by the end of the grant, we will have numbers on the spreadsheet. Whether
Yes.
we're putting them together or the applicant is, we're just not requiring it on the front end. We will have it by that back end. We have to do that reporting. So it'll happen. How it happens is very unclear, but we'll get there.
Okay. I appreciate you clarifying that, and I think after you've explained it, it does seem very equitable and just accessible.
Yeah.
And so I am okay with being outside of my
Yeah.
numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think one of the really exciting parts of this opportunity is to entertain project ideas that might not otherwise see the light of day in front of a funding opportunity. So if this committee can't fund it for whatever the reason, we get 20 great applications and you just have to choose 3. We then have those applications on paper to have in our back burner to when future funding opportunities open, or to send it to the community foundation and say like, hey, this came across our desk, would be really cool. We aren't the right funding partner for it, but maybe you are. Or to one of the many cultural institutions we work with, like, hey, someone pitch us this project that would be a really cool exhibit at your space. The other doors that it could potentially open are really exciting. So I think that's having a very open process could lead to more things in the future. It might just create a boatload of work for us that we have no way to entertain, but I think we're willing to try.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
I'm almost out of them for today, I promise.
I hope not.
Have we considered talking to any other municipalities that have received NEA grant, just to ask them, do you have any best practices, or are there any things that you would avoid doing based on, the process that they took? I just wonder if there's some, I don't even know how you find out who else the recipients are. But.
So the interesting thing about the NEA grant is that they really just intended it to be stuck onto a grant program that we already have. But since our grant program isn't the same as this, that's why we have to sort of rebuild it.
Okay.
But yes, there are, especially with the research that I did last time, there are plenty of programmatic grants out there that I can ask them about best practices. And I've come across at least a couple other cities that have sub-granted NEA funds. And so I can absolutely reach out.
Under contact with the NEA itself, there's a local arts agency staff member in the NEA that works with all of us essentially across the country who received this grant and helps guide us through the process. Similarly, we're a member of Grant Makers in the Arts, the national organization that I want to say majority of the major municipalities and state agencies that are grantors of funding are members of it. So we have direct contacts with those as well.
And then my last question is, are we gonna request a certain format for video and for audio recordings? Or is it just, I don't know, I'm just thinking like Apple Video is .mov or something, and videos create, like, are we gonna?
Yeah, I mean, it'll go through submittable. So
It'll go through submittable.
We have to follow
Submittable
those requirements.
only allows certain file types.
Certain file types will be on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Very quickly, so that Dominic, I can follow your intent to get us out of here on time. The second page of this has a very simple calendar. Working backward, I see, excuse me, I see applications for this being due on October 3rd. And I think that we need to have just maybe an email conversation between the group just on this timeline so that we can get on top of it. There's what I call an intent to apply period. Yes, they can, Nadine. What I call an intent to apply period. You don't have to tell me that you're intending to apply, but if you do, I will help you through the process. I'll remind you when things are coming up. I will look at your application if you need, and there will be info sessions, things like that. So we'll have hopefully a sort of 2-month intent to apply period. So if somebody says, yeah, I'd love to know more about that, I'd love to be in the loop, they will get added to my list and I will keep them in the loop. I would love it if everybody looked at this calendar in the near future and gave me any feedback that they might have. Everything's going to get very tight for a little while. And so I apologize for that. Beyond that, very quickly, next month's meeting is the 4th of July. We will not be meeting on that date. So that's why I'm asking, maybe with Dom's permission, that we have a sort of an email, just if you can read through this document, send me some thoughts that you have about it so that when August 1st comes around, if we're all good, we can start the intent to apply period. Does that make sense?
So no meeting, but you still have some homework to do.
Please do your very short amount of homework. And if you have a question about it, keep reading the document because
And
I've done too much thinking about it.
Dominic, I apologize, but I do have an as may arise. I know we're past time, but if I can have your permission.
Yes.
Just want the committee to be aware that this week we had a budget hearing with City Council on Tuesday. Long story short is we're anticipating a budget deficit in 27-28. The budget office has presented 34 options to the City Council on potential opportunities for budget reductions in order to balance our budget in 27 and 28. 26 looks okay. Doesn't look great, but looks okay. But the shortfalls in 27 and 28 are pretty sizable across the organization. One of the options that was presented to City Council on Tuesday was cultural arts agreements. And I'll just read it real quick. Decoupling the growth from assessed agreements with institutions and grants for agencies is linked to the growth in assessed valuation. Due to declines in other revenue sources, AV growth is expected to be stronger than growth in other types of revenue. This could result in growth for cultural arts that will outpace other growth areas. While I slightly disagree with this document, it's not true, but the impact that it could have on this funding process in the long run is a little bit scary. The projections that they've provided for 27 and 28 are right around $400,000, which this committee distributes this current year $450,000. So if we are decoupled from the cultural mill levy equivalent, it could be really detrimental to this program in the long haul. It's not saying that the suggestion is not to remove the funding program, but to not entertain any increases moving forward. So we're still figuring out what that means. It's one of 34 options that was presented to city council. It does not save them the amount of money that they need in the grand scheme of things, but it is part of the conversation that I definitely want to make sure the committee is aware of. As this item, should it develop, I'll be sure to keep the committee aware, specifically you, Dominic, so that we can communicate. You might be inclined to communicate concerns you may have to city council on this item. So just wanted you to be aware of that one. I will send the document out to the committee just so you're aware of it, and can look into it a little bit further. That's all I got.
We were ending on such a high note and happy moments, Lindsay. Well, there is one happy thing. We have an executive director at Botanica. You sent an email out, Lindsay. When is that? The 27th, right?
Yeah, the 27th. I'll make sure the invite gets out to this whole group. Botanica is one of the hybrid organizations with the city. The director position is a city position, which is a direct report to my office. But Dr. Lynette Zettermerman has begun. She's remote currently. She'll be in person next week. But we have a small meet and greet scheduled for her on Thursday, June 27th from 4 to 6 p.m. And you're all welcome to meet and greet with her, but we are really excited to have her on board, and I'll send out an email for that. No, that is great news. We're really excited to have her.
I like ending on a happy note. Let's end on a happy note.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom.
If there's no other business, I am open to a motion to adjourn. All right, we like hanging out with each other.
Adjourn, seconded.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you.
See you soon.